My name is Miranda Foster, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a marketing executive in Chicago. Last month, I received a text from my mother that changed everything. We changed all the locks on the front door and gate code. We no longer trust you. I stared at my phone, completely blindsided. I'd always been second best to my sister Brittany, but this was different. They'd given her the house despite the fact that I'd been paying the $5,600 monthly mortgage for 2 years. As the reality sank in, I replied, "Understood. Very smart. But I think you overlooked one thing." Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Take a second to drop your location in the comments below, and if this story resonates with you so far, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about standing up for yourself. Now, let's get into how my family's betrayal led to the most difficult and ultimately liberating decision of my life. Growing up in our 4-bedroom suburban home in Oakwood Hills, there was always an unspoken hierarchy in our family. My parents, Gregory and Diane Foster, never tried to hide their preference for my younger sister Brittany. The pattern was established early and continued throughout our lives. On Brittany's birthdays, there would be elaborate parties with dozens of guests, custom cakes, and piles of presents. For mine, we typically had family dinners with a store-bought cake and practical gifts like clothes or school supplies. When I brought home straight A's, my achievement would be acknowledged with a nod and maybe a good job. When Brittany managed to get a B in math after struggling with CS, there would be celebrations and rewards. "Brittany just needs more encouragement," my mother would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. "You're naturally gifted, Miranda. You don't need the same level of support." By high school, I had accepted my place in the family. I focused on academics and building my future, knowing that validation at home would always be limited. Brittany became the family princess, beautiful and charming but irresponsible with money and prone to dramatic life crises that my parents would rush to resolve. 3 years ago, my grandparents passed away within months of each other. They left their house, our family home, to the entire family rather than to my parents directly. It was meant to be a shared inheritance, though we all continued with the existing living arrangements. My grandparents had always seen the inequality in how I was treated, and I believe this was their subtle way of ensuring I received my fair share. After college, I threw myself into my marketing career. Through hard work and determination, I climbed the corporate ladder while Brittany bounced between jobs, usually quitting when the work became too demanding. She married Jeremy, a charming but equally unstable man who shared her belief that they deserved more than they were willing to work for. 2 years ago, my parents faced foreclosure. Years of financial mismanagement, helping Brittany out of debt repeatedly, and my father's business struggles had left them unable to keep up with the $5,600 monthly mortgage payments on the family home. When they tearfully explained their situation during a Sunday dinner, I immediately offered to help. Despite our complicated history, I couldn't bear the thought of losing our family home, the place that held memories of my grandparents and the few happy moments of my childhood. "I can take over the mortgage payments until you get back on your feet," I offered. The relief on their faces was immediate, but there was no real gratitude. It was as if they had expected this from me all along, the responsible daughter who would fix their problems. To afford the payments, I gave up my plans to buy my own condo. I cut back on everything from dining out to vacations. I picked up consulting work on weekends. The financial burden was significant, but I told myself it was temporary and worth it to preserve our family home. Every Sunday, I would still drive to the house for family dinner, sitting at the table with my parents, Brittany, and Jeremy. The dynamics never changed. Brittany remained the center of attention, her latest drama the focus of conversation, while my work achievements went largely unnoticed. My best friend Samantha didn't understand my devotion to a family that consistently undervalued me. "They're taking advantage of you, Miranda," she would say over our Thursday coffee dates. "You're paying the mortgage on a house you don't even live in, and they treat you like an ATM with legs." My boyfriend Daniel was more subtle but shared similar concerns. "I just want you to be appreciated," he would say, holding me close on the nights when I returned from family dinner emotionally drained. Still, I continued making the payments, telling myself that family obligations transcended fair treatment. The house was worth saving, even if my role as savior went unacknowledged. In recent months, I had noticed subtle changes in family dynamics. My parents seemed more secretive, having hushed conversations that would stop when I entered the room. Brittany was visiting more frequently, often disappearing with my mother to discuss things they clearly didn't want me to hear. I brushed these concerns aside, focusing instead on maintaining peace and continuing my financial support. I never expected that my dedication to preserving our family legacy would end with a text message informing me that I was no longer welcome in the home I was paying for. But family relationships are complex, and as I would soon discover, mine was about to be redefined completely. The final Sunday dinner before everything fell apart had seemed like any other at first. I arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and a dessert from the bakery my mother pretended to like. The conversation around the table flowed as usual, with Brittany dominating the discussion about her latest hobby of pottery making, while my update about a major marketing campaign I was leading was acknowledged with distracted nods. As we moved to the living room for coffee, my father cleared his throat in that way he always did before announcements. "We have some news," he said, smiling at Brittany, who was practically bouncing with excitement. My mother reached over to squeeze Brittany's hand. "Brittany and Jeremy are going to be moving into the house with us." I blinked, trying to process this information. Moving in? What about their apartment? "Their lease is ending," my mother explained. "And this house is too big for just your father and me anyway." "It makes financial sense," Jeremy added, though I noticed he couldn't quite meet my eyes. I nodded slowly. "I see. And the mortgage?" "I assume they'll be contributing since I'm still making the full payments." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My father shifted in his seat while my mother suddenly became very interested in her coffee cup. "Well," my father finally said, "we thought that since you're doing so well with your job in the city, and Brittany and Jeremy could really use the help getting established." "What your father is trying to say," my mother interrupted, "is that Brittany deserves this house. She's always been so attached to it, and with you living in the city, you don't really need it anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. Deserves the house? I've been paying the mortgage for 2 years. That's over $130,000 I've contributed to a house that apparently now belongs to Brittany. "Don't be so dramatic, Miranda." Brittany rolled her eyes. "It's not like you don't have the money. Besides, Mom and Dad always intended for me to have the house eventually." "Is that true?" I asked, looking directly at my parents. Neither would meet my gaze, which was answer enough. "I think I should go," I said quietly, gathering my purse. "You always do this," Brittany accused. "When things don't go your way, you just leave instead of supporting the family." I paused at the door. Supporting the family is exactly what I've been doing. Financially, at least. But I'm starting to wonder if that's been a mistake. I spent that night crying on Daniel's shoulder, pouring out years of built-up frustration and hurt. "They don't even see it," I sobbed. "They genuinely believe Brittany deserves everything without having to work for it." "Then maybe it's time to stop enabling them," Daniel suggested gently. For the next week, I avoided calls from my family. My mother sent a few text messages asking if I was still upset and reminding me that family harmony required sacrifices from everyone. I responded minimally, needing time to process the blatant unfairness of the situation. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was getting ready for work when my phone chimed with a text message from my mother. "We changed all the locks on the front door and gate code. We no longer trust you. Brittany saw you driving by the house last night and felt threatened. Please respect our decision." I hadn't been anywhere near the house. The accusation was completely fabricated, a transparent excuse for what they had already decided to do. My hands shook as I read the message over and over. I called Samantha immediately. "They changed the locks," I said as soon as she answered. "They're locking me out of the house that I'm paying for because Brittany lied about me, threatening her." "That's it," Samantha declared. "This is the last straw, Miranda. You need to stop being a doormat for these people." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. "Cancel the payments. she said without hesitation. They can't lock you out of a house and still expect you to pay for it. That's insane. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, considering the consequences. If I stopped paying, the bank would eventually foreclose. My parents couldn't afford the mortgage on their own, and despite Brittany and Jeremy's entitlement, I knew they couldn't qualify for a loan of that size. The family home could be lost. But wasn't it already lost to me? They had made it clear that despite my financial contributions, I had no claim to it. No right to even enter it. With shaking hands, I logged into my online banking account. I navigated to the automatic payments section and found the recurring transfer setup for the mortgage. For a moment, my finger hovered over the mouse. This single click would change everything. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made to keep up those payments. The vacations not taken. The apartment I couldn't afford to buy. The retirement savings I had delayed. I thought about my sister's smug face as she declared she deserved the house. I clicked cancel payment. A confirmation dialog appeared. I clicked yes. Next, I composed an email to the bank, confirming in writing that I was canceling all future automatic payments for the mortgage loan. I explained that I was not a co-owner of the property and would no longer be making payments on others' behalf. After sending the email, I turned off my phone and called in sick to work. I needed a day to process what I had done and prepare for the inevitable fallout. I felt sick to my stomach, but also strangely liberated. For the first time in 2 years, I had chosen myself over my family's demands. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Understood. Very smart, I had replied to my mother's text. But I think you overlooked one thing. I didn't explain what that one thing was. I decided to let the consequences speak for themselves. For the first 48 hours after canceling the mortgage payment, there was complete silence from my family. I knew they had not yet realized what I had done. The mortgage payment was scheduled for the first of the month, still several days away. They were probably congratulating themselves on how smoothly their plan had gone, assuming I had accepted their decision without protest. I used this time to fortify myself emotionally. I met with a therapist, Dr. Emily Watson, who helped me understand that my reaction was not only justified but healthy. What you're describing is a pattern of family dynamics where you've been cast in the role of the provider without receiving appropriate appreciation or reciprocity, she explained during our first session. Setting boundaries, even difficult ones, is essential for your emotional well-being. On the third day, my phone exploded with notifications. It had begun. The first was a voicemail from Brittany. Miranda, what the hell? The bank called about a missed payment. What kind of game are you playing? This is so typical of you. Always jealous of what I have. Call me back immediately. Next came a text from my father. Miranda, this is completely unacceptable behavior. You have a responsibility to this family. Call your mother immediately. My mother's message was more calculated. Sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We only changed the locks for security purposes after some break-ins in the neighborhood. Of course, you're still welcome here. You're our daughter. Please call about this bank issue. The transparent lie made me laugh bitterly. There had been no break-ins in their neighborhood, and the timing immediately after declaring they no longer trusted me was too convenient to be coincidental. By the end of the week, I had received over 30 calls and dozens of text messages. When I continued to maintain silence, they escalated. Screenshots of conversations about me were accidentally sent to family group chats, painting me as selfish and unstable. Extended family members began reaching out, some to express concern, others to lecture me about family duty. You can't just abandon your parents like this, my Aunt Martha wrote. They're getting older and need your support. Cousin Thomas was more direct. Everyone knows you make good money. Why are you being so stingy over helping your sister out? Family helps family. Only my father's sister, Aunt Catherine, seemed to question the narrative. Miranda, I'm not taking sides here, but something doesn't add up. Can we talk? She texted. The constant barrage of accusations and guilt trips took its toll. I began having trouble sleeping, waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. My appetite disappeared, and I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. At work, I struggled to focus on projects that had previously energized me. Daniel became my rock during this time. He would come over with groceries, gently encouraging me to eat. He held me through panic attacks and reminded me of the validity of my decision when doubt crept in. "You didn't abandon them," he would say firmly. "They locked you out of a house you were paying for. Anyone would have done the same thing." 3 weeks after canceling the payment, I agreed to meet with Aunt Catherine for coffee. Unlike the rest of the family, she had always been somewhat fair in her treatment of Brittany and me. "I wanted to hear your side," she said after we ordered, "because what I'm hearing from your parents doesn't make sense." I showed her the text message about changing the locks and explained the full situation, including my years of mortgage payments. Aunt Catherine sighed deeply. "I suspected something like this. You should know that Brittany has been working on your parents for months. She's been telling them that you're resentful of her, that you've been making comments about taking the house away from them."
"What?"
"I never said anything like that." "I know," she nodded. "But Brittany can be very convincing. She and Jeremy are in financial trouble, Miranda. They've both been unemployed for months. I think they saw the house as their safety net, and you as the obstacle." This new information sent me reeling. Not only had I been financially supporting my parents, but I had inadvertently been bankrolling a scheme to push me out of the family entirely. Meanwhile, the bank had sent its first formal notice regarding the missed payment. My mother forwarded it to me with a single line, "Please fix this, Miranda." The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, they weren't acknowledging what they had done wrong or apologizing. They simply expected me to resume my financial support despite their betrayal. For the first time, I began to seriously consider permanent estrangement from my family. The thought brought both grief and relief. I discussed it with Dr. Watson in our weekly sessions. "Estrangement is a significant step," she cautioned. "But it's important to recognize that healthy relationships require mutual respect. Sometimes creating distance is the only way to protect yourself." As the days passed, my resolve strengthened. Daniel helped me stay strong when self-doubt crept in. "They're counting on you feeling guilty," he pointed out. "They've trained you your whole life to put their needs first. Breaking that pattern isn't easy, but it's necessary." He was right. With each attempt at manipulation, with each refusal to acknowledge their wrongdoing, my family was only confirming that I had made the right decision. The mortgage payment had been the last thread connecting us, and now that I had cut it, I was beginning to see how unhealthy our relationship had truly been. Still, in quiet moments, I would find myself staring at photos from happier times, wondering how we had reached this point, and if there was any path back to a healthy relationship. But as the bank's second notice arrived and my family's tactics grew more desperate, it became increasingly clear that reconciliation would require changes they weren't willing to make. 2 weeks after I canceled the mortgage payment, the situation escalated dramatically. The bank sent a formal default warning to the house address. According to Aunt Catherine, who had become my only source of information about the family, the letter threw my parents into a panic. "They genuinely didn't think you would go through with it," she told me during one of our now regular phone calls. "Your father kept saying you would come to your senses and start paying again." "And Brittany?" I asked, though I could already guess the answer. "Brittany and Jeremy are in full crisis mode. They tried to apply for a mortgage themselves, but their credit is abysmal. Multiple rejections. They can't qualify for anything close to what they need." A small, petty part of me felt satisfied by this news. The reality they had been avoiding was finally catching up to them. The first attempt at reconciliation came from my mother, though her message made it clear she still didn't understand the fundamental problem. "Miranda, sweetie, I think this has all gotten out of hand," her voicemail began. "I know you're upset about the locks, but that was Brittany's idea. She was concerned after seeing some suspicious activity. We can give you the new code, if that's what this is about. Please call us back about the mortgage situation." No acknowledgement of giving the house to Brittany. No recognition that they had effectively stolen 2 years of mortgage payments from me. Just a transparent attempt to get the money flowing again. My father was less subtle. His call came on a Tuesday evening as I was making dinner with Daniel. "Miranda, this has gone far enough," he barked when I finally answered. "You have a responsibility to this family. Your mother is beside herself with worry. The bank is sending threatening letters. Is this really how you want things to be? You changed the locks on me, Dad. I replied calmly. You texted that you no longer trusted me. Why would I continue paying for a house I'm not allowed to enter? That was a misunderstanding, he insisted. Brittany thought she saw someone who looked like you driving by multiple times. We were just being cautious. We both know that's not true, I said. And even if it were, you still told me Brittany deserves the house despite the fact that I've paid over $130,000 toward the mortgage. That money was a gift to the family, he shouted, his voice rising. You can't just take it back because you're jealous of your sister. I ended the call after that, my hands shaking with anger. A gift. That's how they had categorized my sacrifice. Not an investment in our shared family home, not a contribution that gave me any rights or standing, but a gift they could accept and then dismiss me. Even Brittany's husband Jeremy tried to insert himself into the situation. He called from a number I didn't recognize, attempting to position himself as the reasonable party. Look, Miranda, I understand you're upset, he began smoothly. But surely we can work something out. Maybe you could continue the payments for another 6 months while Brittany and I get on our feet? We can look at paying you back a portion over time. The audacity was almost impressive. They still saw me only as a source of funding for their lifestyle, not as a person with legitimate grievances. Determined to protect myself legally, I scheduled a consultation with Amanda Chen, a family law attorney recommended by Dr. Watson. Based on what you've told me, you have no legal obligation to continue making these payments, Amanda confirmed after reviewing my documentation. The mortgage is in your parents' names, not yours. You've been making voluntary payments. But could they sue me for stopping? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. They could try, but they'd have a very weak case. Do you have any documentation showing that these payments were intended as loans rather than gifts? I pulled out my phone and showed her the text exchanges with my parents when I first started making the payments. In one critical message, my father had written, "We appreciate you helping with the mortgage until we get back on our feet. We'll make it up to you somehow." This is good, Amanda nodded. It establishes that the arrangement was temporary and with an expectation of reciprocity. I'd also recommend printing out all your bank statements showing these payments, as well as any other communications about the house and your contributions. Armed with this legal reassurance, I met with a financial advisor to review my improved financial situation now that I wasn't carrying the burden of my family's mortgage. If you continue saving at this rate, you could have a down payment for your own place within 6 months, he told me, reviewing the projections. The amount you are putting toward their mortgage, if redirected to your own investments, will make a significant difference in your financial future. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a glimmer of excitement about the future. My own home, my own investment, my own life, free from the constant drain of supporting people who didn't appreciate it. The family's desperation grew as the bank's deadline approached. My aunt informed me that my parents had attempted to access my online banking information, triggering a fraud alert that my bank fortunately caught in time. They're getting desperate, Aunt Catherine warned. Diane mentioned asking your cousin Mark to talk some sense into you. You know how aggressive he can be. I immediately blocked Mark's number. Then, on Amanda's advice, I blocked most of my family members except for Aunt Catherine, whose intelligence I still trusted. The situation took an even darker turn when Brittany somehow got the contact information for my boss and called him, spinning a tale about me having a mental breakdown and needing intervention. Fortunately, my work record spoke for itself, and my boss was more concerned for my well-being than suspicious of my capability. Your sister called, he mentioned casually during our weekly one-on-one. She seemed intense. Is everything okay, Miranda? I gave him a sanitized version of the family drama, emphasizing that it wouldn't affect my work performance. He nodded sympathetically. Family can be complicated. Take the time you need, and let me know if there's anything we can do to support you. His simple kindness nearly brought me to tears. Why couldn't my actual family show this level of basic decency? The bank's final warning letter arrived at the house 30 days after the first missed payment. According to Aunt Catherine, My mother broke down crying while my father shouted for over an hour. Brittany and Jeremy began apartment hunting, suddenly faced with the reality that their plan had backfired spectacularly. Through it all, Daniel remained my steadfast supporter. "Move in with me," he suggested one evening as we discussed the ongoing situation. "Your lease is up next month anyway, and it would save you money while you're building your down payment." The offer was tempting, not just financially but emotionally. Having his constant presence as a buffer against my family's chaos seemed like exactly what I needed. "Are you sure we're ready for that?" I asked, though we've been dating for nearly 3 years. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said, taking my hands in his. "I love you, Miranda. I want to build a life with you, one where you're valued and respected." I agreed, feeling as though pieces of my new life were falling into place just as the old one was being dismantled. The very next day, an email arrived that signaled the final act of this family drama was about to begin. The email arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was in a meeting. When I checked my phone during a break, the subject line immediately caught my attention. Urgent. Family financial matter. The sender was Richard Thompson, a lawyer I vaguely recognized as an old golf buddy of my father's. The message was brief but unmistakably panicked. "Miranda Foster, I've been retained by Gregory and Diane Foster regarding the mortgage situation. We have a serious problem that requires immediate attention. Please call my office as soon as possible to discuss resolution options before this escalates further." I forwarded the email to Amanda Chen, who advised me not to respond directly. "Let me handle any legal communications," she wrote back promptly. "They're trying to intimidate you, but they have no legal leverage." Over the next 24 hours, I received multiple calls from unknown numbers, likely Richard Thompson's office. I let them all go to voicemail. One message from my father particularly stood out. "Miranda, please. We need to talk. The bank is moving forward with foreclosure proceedings. We can still fix this if you just call us back. Please, sweetheart. We're your family." The desperation in his voice almost moved me, until I remembered how quickly they had discarded me when it suited their purposes. On Saturday morning, Aunt Catherine called with news. "They're calling an emergency family meeting tomorrow at my house," she informed me. "Everyone's been invited, including you. I think you should come, Miranda. It's time to clear the air once and for all." I hesitated, torn between wanting complete separation and the need for closure. "Will Brittany and Jeremy be there?" "Yes, along with your parents and a few others. Richard Thompson might come too." After consulting with both Daniel and Amanda Chen, I decided to attend, but with conditions. Daniel would accompany me as support, and I would bring documentation of all my mortgage payments and the text messages about the locks. Amanda prepared me for potential legal threats and reminded me of my rights. "Remember, you're entering this from a position of power, not weakness," she emphasized. "They need you far more than you need them." Sunday afternoon arrived all too quickly. Daniel and I pulled up to Aunt Catherine's house to find several cars already parked outside, including my parents' sedan and Brittany's SUV. I took a deep breath, clutching the folder of documents like a shield. "We can leave any time you want," Daniel reminded me, squeezing my hand. "Just say the word." Aunt Catherine greeted us at the door with a sympathetic smile and led us to her living room, where the family had assembled. The conversation stopped abruptly when I entered. My mother's eyes were red and puffy from crying. My father looked haggard, with new gray streaks in his hair that hadn't been there a month ago. Brittany sat rigid beside Jeremy, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Also present were my Uncle Robert, Aunt Martha, and Richard Thompson, looking uncomfortable in a casual Sunday suit. "Miranda," my father began, standing awkwardly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but didn't speak, taking a seat across from them with Daniel beside me. "I think we all know why we're here," my father continued. "The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings on our home. We have 60 days to bring the mortgage current before they move forward with a sale." "I don't understand why this concerns me," I said coolly. "As you've made clear, it's your house, not mine." My mother let out a small sob. "Miranda, please. This is our family home. Your grandparents' home. How can you let it go so easily? I didn't let it go, I replied. You locked me out of it. There's a difference. Richard Thompson cleared his throat. Miss Foster, your parents have explained that you are making voluntary contributions to the mortgage payments, which they greatly appreciated. However, the abrupt termination of these payments without notice has created a significant hardship. I opened my folder and removed the printouts of the text messages. Would you like to see the notice I received, Mr. Thompson? The one informing me that they had changed the locks and gate code because they no longer trusted me? His eyes widened slightly as he read the message. I wasn't aware of this specific communication. Of course you weren't, I said. Just like you probably weren't informed that I've paid over $130,000 toward the mortgage over the past 2 years, only to be told that my sister deserves the house more than I do. Brittany could no longer contain herself. This is so typical. You're always the victim, aren't you, Miranda? Always keeping score and holding grudges. So, what if they gave me the house? You don't even live there. I don't live there because I couldn't afford both the mortgage payments and rent in the city, I shot back. I gave up buying my own place to save our family home, Brittany. What exactly have you contributed? Jeremy attempted to intervene. This isn't productive. We need to focus on solutions. Miranda, if you could just resume the payments temporarily. No, I stated firmly. I will not resume payments for a house I've been explicitly barred from entering for people who have shown such disregard for my contributions. My father's face reddened. So that's it? You're just going to let the bank take the house? Your mother and I will have nowhere to go. You could get jobs, I suggested. Like I did. Pay your own mortgage, like adults are supposed to do. We're too old to start over, my mother wailed. And in this job market? Be reasonable, Miranda. I am being reasonable. I subsidized your lifestyle for 2 years while you plotted behind my back to give everything to Brittany. Now you can experience the consequences of those choices. Brittany jumped to her feet. This is all because you've always been jealous of me. Always competing for attention. Always trying to show how much better you are with your fancy job and your perfect boyfriend. Brittany, Aunt Catherine interjected sharply. That's enough. Miranda has legitimate grievances here. Oh, you're taking her side now too? Brittany spun toward our aunt. I suppose she's been poisoning you against me as well. No one's poisoning anyone, Uncle Robert sighed. But Miranda's right about one thing. She's been paying the mortgage while being treated like an outsider. That's not fair by anyone's definition. The conversation devolved from there. Brittany had a complete meltdown, screaming that I was destroying the family out of spite. My mother alternated between sobbing and making guilt-laden appeals to my sense of family duty. My father vacillated between anger and desperate bargaining. Through it all, I remained calm, supported by Daniel's steady presence beside me and the knowledge that I was finally standing up for myself after years of acquiescence. Richard Thompson, looking increasingly uncomfortable, finally spoke again. From a legal perspective, I must advise everyone that Ms. Foster has no obligation to continue these payments. They were voluntary contributions without any formal agreement. While morally complicated, legally this is straightforward. So, she can just walk away? My father demanded incredulously. After all we've done for her? I couldn't help but laugh. All you've done for me? Like what exactly? Consistently favor Brittany? Take my financial support for granted? Lock me out of the house I was paying for? The room fell silent as the truth of my words hung in the air. What do you want, Miranda? My mother finally asked, her voice small. Do you want the house? Is that it?
No, irrapli honestly.
I don't want the house. I don't want anything from any of you anymore. I just want to be free of this dysfunctional dynamic where I give and am still treated like I don't matter. I stood up, gathering my documents. I'm done being the family ATM. I'm done being the responsible one who sacrifices while Brittany gets everything handed to her. I'm done with all of it. You can't just walk away from family, Brittany shrieked as I headed for the door. I turned back one last time. You all walked away from me the moment you changed those locks. I'm just making it official. As Daniel and I drove away from Aunt Catherine's house, I felt simultaneously empty and liberated. 32 years of family history, of trying to earn love and approval that was freely given to my sister, had culminated in this moment of final separation. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked softly. "No," I admitted. "But I think I will be." The first week after the confrontation passed in a blur of emotional processing and practical arrangements. Daniel and I found a two-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood we both loved, significantly more affordable than my previous place. Moving in together felt like the first positive step toward building my new life. According to Aunt Catherine, who remained my only family contact, the bank's foreclosure notice had been officially delivered to the house. My parents had frantically applied for loan modifications and new mortgages, but their age and limited income made approval unlikely. Brittany and Jeremy, with their poor credit history, fared no better. "They're finally facing reality," Aunt Catherine reported during one of our weekly calls. "Your father's considering coming out of retirement to work part-time. Your mother mentioned selling some of her jewelry collection." I felt a twinge of sadness, but reminded myself that these were natural consequences of their own choices, not my responsibility to fix. The apologetic messages began trickling in around the 2-week mark. My mother's came first, a carefully worded text that still managed to miss the point. "Miranda, I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot about our family situation. While I still believe you could have handled things differently, I understand you were hurt by some of our decisions. Your father, and I miss you. Please consider reopening communication." No acknowledgement of their betrayal. No recognition of how they had used me financially while planning to exclude me. Just a tepid admission that I might have been hurt by some of their decisions, as if changing the locks on the house I was paying for was a minor faux pas. My father's message came a few days later, slightly more direct but still falling short. "Miranda, this situation has gotten out of hand. I admit we should have discussed the house arrangements with you before making decisions. That was wrong. But cutting us off completely over money isn't right either. We're still your parents." I showed both messages to Dr. Watson during our therapy session. "Do you notice how they're both still minimizing what happened?" she pointed out. "Your mother calls it our family situation, rather than acknowledging their specific actions. Your father reduces it to being about money, when it's really about trust, respect, and years of unequal treatment. So they still don't get it." I sighed. "Not fully," she agreed. "But this is often how estrangement begins to resolve, if it does. Small acknowledgments that gradually become deeper as they reflect more on their behavior." I decided not to respond to either message yet, needing more time and space to heal. Surprisingly, the extended family began shifting their perspective as well. Cousins who had initially condemned my abandonment of my parents reached out with more nuanced messages after hearing the full story. Aunt Martha, who had been one of my harshest critics, called to apologize. "I didn't know about the locks, Miranda," she admitted, "or how much you'd been contributing financially."
"I'm sorry I dumped the conclusions."
The most significant change came in my own life. Without the burden of the mortgage payments, my financial situation improved dramatically. I opened a dedicated savings account for my future home purchase, watching with satisfaction as the balance grew each month. At work, I found new focus and energy, earning recognition for a particularly successful campaign. My boss called me into his office one Friday afternoon with unexpected news. "We're creating a new position, Director of Digital Marketing Strategy, and we'd like you to consider it. It would mean a substantial raise and more responsibility, but based on your recent work, I think you're ready." I accepted immediately, feeling a surge of pride that had nothing to do with family approval or validation. Daniel celebrated my promotion with champagne and takeout from my favorite restaurant. "To Miranda," he toasted, "who's finally being recognized for how amazing she actually is." Meanwhile, the family home situation continued to unravel. The bank listed the property for a short sale, accepting less than the full mortgage amount to avoid a lengthy foreclosure process. According to Aunt Catherine, my parents had found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, downsizing significantly from the 4-bedroom house they had lived in for decades. "They're shell-shocked," she reported. "I don't think they ever truly believed this would happen. They kept expecting you to swoop in and save them at the last minute. Brittany and Jeremy's marriage had begun showing serious strain under the financial pressure. They had moved into a studio apartment, a far cry from the spacious family home they had expected to inherit. Their frequent arguments could be heard through the thin walls, according to neighbors who reported back to the family grapevine. 3 months after our confrontation, I received an email from my mother that was different from her previous attempts at communication. Dear Miranda, I don't expect a response to this message. I just need to say some things that have been on my mind as your father, and I pack up 30 years of memories into cardboard boxes. I was wrong. We were wrong. Not just about the house, but about how we've treated you your entire life. It took losing everything to make me see what we had done to you over the years. You were always the responsible one, the one we could count on. We took that for granted and gave Brittany the attention and support because she seemed to need it more. That wasn't fair to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness or financial help. Those bridges may be permanently burned, and we have only ourselves to blame. I just wanted you to know that I recognize my failures as your mother, and I am truly sorry for the pain we caused you. Love always. Mom. I read the email multiple times, tears streaming down my face. It was the first genuine acknowledgement of the deeper patterns that had led to our estrangement. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process the shift, but I saved the email rather than deleting it. Daniel and I began house hunting, looking for a place that could be truly ours. The freedom to choose based on our own preferences rather than family obligations felt exhilarating. What do you think about this neighborhood? Daniel asked as we drove through an area we hadn't previously considered. I like it, I replied, noticing the tree-lined streets and proximity to parks. It feels like somewhere we could build a life. That's what I was thinking too, he smiled, reaching for my hand. 6 months after canceling the mortgage payment, I agreed to meet my mother for lunch. We chose a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our respective homes. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with careful small talk about the weather and current events. Eventually, she brought up what we both knew was the real purpose of our meeting. I want to apologize again, Miranda. Not just for the house situation, but for everything.
For always making you feel second best.
For taking advantage of your generosity. For not being the mother you deserved. I nodded, acknowledging her words without immediately offering forgiveness. I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to hear you recognize these patterns. I've been seeing a therapist, she admitted, surprising me. She's helping me understand how my own upbringing affected how I parented you and Brittany. It doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm trying to be better. We talked for nearly 2 hours, more honestly than we ever had before. She told me about the challenges of downsizing, about my father's struggle to accept their new circumstances, about Brittany's increasing instability as her marriage deteriorated. I shared selective details about my own life, my promotion, the house hunting, my continued therapy with Dr. Watson. I maintained boundaries, keeping the conversation focused on healing rather than rebuilding the same unhealthy dynamic. As we prepared to leave, she asked hesitantly, "Do you think we could do this again sometime?" I considered the question carefully. Maybe. Let's take it slowly. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall I had built to protect myself. Whether it would lead to reconciliation remained to be seen, but for the first time, I was approaching family relationships on my own terms rather than from a position of obligation or guilt. That evening, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months with Daniel. I never thought I'd be in this position, I admitted. Financially stable, emotionally stronger, actually considering having my mother back in my life, but on completely different terms. You stood up for yourself, he said simply. Everything else followed from that. And he was right. The simple act of refusing to continue being exploited had rippled outward, transforming not just my family dynamics, but my entire life. I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed, and boundaries I hadn't known I needed. As difficult as the journey had been, I wouldn't have changed it. Some relationships had been severed, others transformed, but I had finally found my voice and my value. And that was worth more than any house could ever be. The sunlight streams through the bay windows of our new home, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors. Daniel and I have been here for 3 months now, gradually transforming the three-bedroom craftsman into our sanctuary. It's smaller than my parents' old house, but perfectly sized for us, with room for a home office and eventually, perhaps, a nursery. A year has passed since I canceled that mortgage payment and set in motion the collapse of my family's carefully constructed hierarchy. Looking back, I barely recognized the person I was then, so desperate for approval that I would financially cripple myself to earn a fraction of the love freely given to my sister. The family home was sold at a loss, with new owners moving in 6 months ago. According to my mother, they're a young couple with twin toddlers who plan to renovate the kitchen and add a playroom. Sometimes I drive by and see their children playing in the yard where Brittany and I once played. There's a symmetry to it that feels right, a new family creating their own memories without the weight of our dysfunction. My parents have adjusted to their more modest lifestyle with varying degrees of acceptance. My father initially struggled with what he perceived as a loss of status, but his part-time consulting work has given him purpose and structure. My mother has embraced downsizing with surprising enthusiasm, discovering a talent for making their small apartment feel cozy and welcoming. Our relationship remains tentative, but improving. We exchange Christmas cards and occasional text messages. 3 months ago, I agreed to a dinner at their apartment, bringing Daniel as both support and buffer. The conversation remained superficial but cordial, focusing on safe topics like my mother's new volunteer work at the local library and my father's fishing trips with his retirement group. Brittany's story took a different turn. Her marriage to Jeremy collapsed under the strain of financial hardship and mutual blame. They separated 4 months ago, with Jeremy moving back to his parents' home in Colorado. Brittany now lives in a studio apartment, working as an administrative assistant at a local insurance office, a far cry from the privileged life she had expected to lead in the family home. We haven't spoken directly, though she occasionally sends bitter text messages when she's been drinking, accusing me of destroying the family out of jealousy. I've learned to let these roll off me, recognizing them as projections of her own disappointment rather than reflections of reality. My final session with Dr. Emily Watson was last week. After a year of weekly therapy, we both agreed I had developed the tools needed to navigate my family relationships and maintain healthy boundaries. "You've done remarkable work, Miranda," she told me as we concluded our time together. "You've transformed your understanding of your worth and your right to be treated with respect." Professionally, I've thrived in my new role as marketing director. The substantial raise that came with the promotion, combined with the money saved from no longer paying my parents' mortgage, accelerated our home buying timeline. Daniel and I were able to put down a 20% deposit, securing a manageable mortgage on our own terms. Daniel proposed 3 months ago. On the anniversary of the day, I canceled the mortgage payment. "I chose today because it's when you truly began putting yourself first," he explained as he knelt before me, ring box open to reveal a simple but elegant solitaire. "I want to spend my life with the strong, self-respecting woman you've become." Our wedding plans are underway, deliberately small and intimate. I've invited my parents, but not Brittany, a boundary decision that felt both difficult and necessary. Aunt Catherine will be my matron of honor, having remained my steadfast ally throughout this journey. Last month, I had lunch alone with my mother for the first time since our estrangement. She seemed smaller somehow, more vulnerable, but also more authentic than I had ever known her to be. "I've been thinking a lot about family patterns," she said as we shared dessert. "About how my mother always favored my brother, and how I unconsciously recreated that dynamic with you and Brittany. Do you think it can be broken?" I asked. "The cycle, I mean." She looked at me thoughtfully. "I think you've already broken it, Miranda. By refusing to accept the role we assigned you. By demanding better." She paused, then added quietly, "If I ever have grandchildren, I promise to love them equally." It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it felt like the beginning of a new type of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and manipulation. As I reflect on this journey, I realize the most important lesson wasn't about family loyalty or even standing up for myself, though those were significant. It was about recognizing that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. That true love, whether familial or romantic, involves reciprocity and respect, not sacrifice and exploitation. I no longer harbor anger toward my family, though I maintain careful boundaries. I understand now that my parents did the best they could with their own limited emotional tools, and Brittany is a product of the unbalanced system they created. Understanding doesn't require me to subject myself to further harm, but it has helped me release the bitterness that once threatened to consume me. Daniel comes up behind me as I stand at the window, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he murmurs into my hair. "Just reflecting," I reply, leaning back against him. "On how sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest freedom." He nods, understanding as always. "No regrets." "None," I say with complete honesty. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
And I am.
In a home that's truly mine, with a partner who values me, surrounded by relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The journey here was painful, but the destination has been worth every difficult step along the way. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to your freedom? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself when it felt like everyone was against you? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more content about setting boundaries and reclaiming your self-worth. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose themselves sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice for others, but by how much you honor your own needs and values.